Honda's luxury division just had its best quarter in years. Acura climbed past Cadillac this spring to become the fourth largest luxury brand in America, with sales up more than 5% while almost every rival around it, BMW, Lexus, Mercedes, Audi, was posting declines. The same year, the same company is writing off as much as $15.7 billion, largely because it just killed the electric cars it was counting on to carry Acura into the next decade. Same brand, same 12 months. Neither number makes sense without the other. This is the story of Honda's American luxury gamble, and it starts with a bet nobody inside the company wanted to make. In the early 1980s, Honda had a problem money couldn't fix. Its customers were getting richer, and there was nowhere for them to go. The most expensive Accord on the lot barely cracked $20,000, with none of the leather, none of the badge, none of the status that BMW and Mercedes were selling alongside their engines. Loyal Honda owners were trading up, and they were trading out straight into a European dealership. Honda could watch that happen, or it could try something no Japanese automaker had ever done before, build a second brand from nothing, aimed straight at the heart of the German luxury market. That gamble became Acura. It would spend the next 40 years inventing a category, nearly wreck itself trying to sound more expensive than it was, get lapped by two competitors that only exist because Acura proved the idea worked, bet its identity on a supercar and then an electric future, watch both collapse, and somehow come out the other side building the one thing that's finally paying off, almost by accident. To understand how all of that fits inside a single brand, you have to start at the beginning, in a boardroom where the safest move was to do nothing at all. By September 1984, Honda had a name. Not a plan, not dealerships, not even confirmed styling, just a name, handed over by a San Francisco naming firm called NameLab after months of work. Acura, borrowed from the Latin root for precision. The tagline came with it. Precision-crafted performance. Keep that phrase in mind because 40 years later it becomes the exact line Acura uses to explain how it finally found its way back to itself. On March 27, 1986, the gamble went live. 60 dealerships opened across 18 states, an entirely separate sales network from Honda, with its own showrooms, its own service bays, its own identity built from the ground up. Two cars carried the entire brand. The Legend, a V6 luxury sedan developed jointly with Britain's Austin Rover Group, and the Integra, a sharp four-cylinder sport compact aimed at buyers who wanted performance without the German price tag. Skeptics inside the industry didn't believe a Japanese company could sell luxury. Some of Honda's own executives weren't fully convinced either. The market answered fast. In its first 9 months, Acura sold nearly 53,000 cars. By the end of 1987, that number more than doubled, past 109,000 units, enough to make Acura the #1 import luxury nameplate in the country, ahead of Mercedes, ahead of BMW, ahead of every European brand it had been built to challenge. Toyota and Nissan took notice immediately, announcing their own luxury divisions within the year. Acura had a 3-year head start on both of them, and for a while it looked unstoppable. The credibility wasn't just about sales. That same year, an Integra driven by Parker Johnstone won the IMSA International Sedan Series Manufacturers' Championship, and the following year, the Legend Coupe took home Motor Trend's Import Car of the Year award. Acura wasn't just selling cars, it was collecting the kind of trophies that told skeptical buyers this brand belonged in the same conversation as the Europeans. If you're new to the channel and you want more of these forensic breakdowns of how great brands actually fall apart or claw their way back from the dead, subscribing is the easiest way to catch the next one before it goes up. The 1990s only added to the case. In 1991, Acura launched the NSX, a mid-engine supercar built to go toe-to-toe with Ferrari and Porsche, and it largely succeeded, earning praise for a level of everyday reliability exotic cars simply didn't offer. The Legend and Integra kept winning championships on track and top 10 lists in the press. By the mid-2000s, Acura had grown into one of the most respected names in the American car market, a brand that had done the improbable, convinced buyers that a Japanese company could sell luxury as credibly as Munich or Stuttgart. That growth peaked in 2005. Acura sold 209,000, 610 vehicles in the United States that year, its best result ever, a number the brand has never come close to matching since. For a company that entered the luxury market as an outsider, it was proof the entire bet had paid off. Honda hadn't just built a second brand, it had built an empire that stood shoulder to shoulder with the Europeans it set out to beat, using nothing but two cars and a made-up Latin word. But empires built on two names are fragile in a very specific way. Everything that made Acura feel premium, the Legend, the Integra, the reputation those two words had earned over a decade, lived entirely in language. And somewhere inside Honda, a group of product planners had already decided that language was the problem. They were wrong. But it would take Acura the better part of 3 decades to fully understand how wrong, and by the time it did, real damage had already been done to the brand's identity. The decision landed in 1996, and it looked small at the time. Acura's product planners decided customers didn't need to remember individual car names, they needed to remember the brand instead. So the Legend, the sedan that had carried Acura to number 1, was renamed the 3.5 RL. The Vigor became the 2.5 TL and the 3.2 TL. Across the lineup, the words that had built a decade of loyalty, Legend, Vigor, eventually Integra, were swapped out for letters and displacement numbers borrowed from the NSX's naming pattern. The logic wasn't crazy on paper. BMW sold a 3 Series and a 5 Series without needing character names for either one. But BMW had spent decades building recognition into those numbers before Acura ever existed. Acura tried to skip that entire process, trading names with real emotional equity for a scheme customers hadn't asked for and didn't immediately understand. The new RL, styled cautiously close to the far more expensive Lexus LS, arrived without a V8 at a moment when American luxury buyers still equated bigger engines with bigger status. It undercut its own flagship before the badge change had even settled. In Canada, the Integra sedan quietly disappeared entirely, replaced by a rebadged Honda Civic sold under the name 1.6 EL, a car-sharing showroom space with vehicles that had once felt genuinely distinctive. Longtime owners and the enthusiast press at the time described the new alphanumeric names as anonymous, next to what they replaced, closer to spec sheet codes than cars people actually wanted to be seen driving. That distinction mattered more than Acura's planners expected. None of it was fatal on its own. But it was the first crack in a brand that had spent a decade convincing America it belonged next to Mercedes and BMW. And cracks in luxury brands rarely stay small for long. Through the late 1990s and into the 2000s, that crack widened, mostly because Acura wasn't the only Japanese company chasing the market it had invented. Lexus had launched in 1989, 3 years behind Acura, and by 1998 its RX crossover had become the best-selling vehicle in the brand's entire lineup, a title it has never given up since. Infiniti, Nissan's answer to the same opportunity, spent its first decade trailing both rivals badly. Then in 2003 it introduced the G35, a rear-wheel drive sports sedan that undercut BMW's 3 Series on price while matching much of its performance. The G35 changed everything for Infiniti. Sales jumped more than 70% in a single year. By 2007, Infiniti had done something that would have sounded absurd a decade earlier. It overtook Acura in total American sales and held that lead for 6 straight years. The brand that beat Toyota and Nissan to the American luxury market by 3 years was now running third among the very competitors it had inspired into existence. Acura hadn't collapsed. Its cars still won reliability awards, still scored well on customer satisfaction surveys, still moved respectable volume year after year. But respectable wasn't what had built the brand in 1986. Acura won its first decade by being the exciting alternative to European luxury. By the mid-2000s, it had quietly become the safe alternative to Lexus instead, a very different position and a much harder one to sell from. Facing that slide, Acura needed something to remind buyers why the brand existed in the first place. Something with teeth. Something that could reconnect a fading nameplate to the performance identity it had built its name on decades earlier. In 2016, Acura thought it had found the answer and staked the brand's future on it. That answer was the second-generation NSX, and on paper, it was exactly what a struggling performance brand needed. A hybrid, all-wheel drive supercar built entirely in Marysville, Ohio, at a dedicated performance manufacturing center Honda, built specifically to produce it. Nearly 600 horsepower, a direct shot at Porsche and Ferrari. This wasn't a simple halo car. It was meant as proof that Acura still had the engineering credibility that had made the original NSX legendary back in 1991. The buyers never really showed up. In its best year, 2017, Acura sold 581 NSX in the United States. By 2021, that number had fallen to 123 units, in a year when Porsche moved more than 9,000 911S in the same market. Across its entire 6-year production run, Honda sold roughly 1,800 NSXs total in the United States, a rounding error next to the exotic car segment it had been built to compete in. The problem wasn't the engineering. Reviewers consistently praised how the car drove, and even the earliest teardowns of its hybrid all-wheel drive system read like praise for genuine innovation. The problem was that Acura had spent 30 years teaching American buyers to think of it as a reliable, sensibly priced alternative to European luxury, then asked those same buyers to suddenly accept it as a 6-figure supercar brand overnight. Trust like that doesn't transfer just because the badge stays the same. In November 2022, Acura built the final second-generation NSX, a limited-run Type S model, and quietly closed the chapter. The company said it remained committed to the nameplate and hinted the next NSX might be electric. That commitment would resurface a few years later, in a very different form, attached to a much bigger promise, one that would fail in a way that made the NSX's disappointing sales look almost survivable by comparison. That bigger promise arrived in 2024 in the shape of the ZDX, Acura's first fully electric SUV. But there was a catch buried in the fine print. The ZDX wasn't really an Acura underneath. It rode on General Motors' Altium platform, the same bones as the Cadillac Lyriq and the Chevrolet Blazer EV, assembled on the same production line in Spring Hill, Tennessee. Acura handled the styling and the tuning. The engineering identity underneath belonged to somebody else entirely. Customers noticed, or at least the pricing did. Year-to-date sales through June 2025 sat at just over 10,000 units, a modest number next to rivals like the Tesla Model Y and the Ford Mustang Mach-E. To move the units, it did sell off dealer lots. Acura piled on discounts approaching $30,000 per vehicle between federal credits, lease cash, and regional incentives, at one point pricing a ZDX lease just $5 a month above a Honda CR-V hybrid. That kind of discounting doesn't build a luxury brand, it quietly subsidizes one. In September 2025, after barely a full model year on sale, Honda cancelled all remaining ZDX production, citing slower than expected EV adoption and shifting government policy. The same year delivered a second blow. In July 2025, Acura ended production of the TLX, its last traditional sedan, and the direct descendant of the TL that had once symbolized the brand's earlier recovery attempts. 30 years of sedan lineage, gone in the same 12 months as the brand's only electric SUV. Acura wasn't just losing individual nameplates anymore. It was losing entire categories, one after another, faster than it could replace them. Through all of it, Acura kept pointing to one lifeline, the RSX, a ground-up in-house electric SUV built on Honda's own new EV platform rather than borrowed GM parts, scheduled to start production at a $4.4 billion EV hub in Ohio in the second half of 2026. Unlike the ZDX, this one was supposed to be entirely, unmistakably Acura's own. It was the brand's chance to prove the electric future it had gambled on could still work. It never got the chance to try. In March 2026, Honda killed it. Not just the RSX, the entire electric lineup built around it, the Honda Zero Series Saloon, the Honda Zero Series SUV. Both had been unveiled to fanfare at CES, just over a year earlier. Both were months from production. Both were cancelled, alongside the Acura RSX, in a single announcement. The reasoning was blunt. Honda pointed to new American tariff policy hammering its gas and hybrid business and declining competitiveness in Asia, where it said resources poured into EV development had left its core lineup exposed to faster-moving Chinese rivals. The Zero Series had been positioned as the first of 7 planned models meant to carry Honda through the rest of the decade. All of that got shelved in a single afternoon. The company projected losses of up to 2.5 trillion yen, in dollars as much as 15.7 billion. Executives took pay cuts. The $4.4 billion EV hub in Ohio, built specifically to manufacture the RSX and the Zero Series, sat there with nothing scheduled to run through it. Acura's answer to the ZDX's failure, the car meant to prove the brand could build a real EV entirely on its own terms, never reached a single showroom. 2 attempts to modernize Acura's identity. 2 expensive failures. First a supercar almost nobody bought in meaningful numbers, then an electric future cancelled before it ever launched. On paper, this reads like the story of a brand that lost its way permanently, unable to figure out what it's supposed to be. Decades after inventing the entire category, it now struggles to compete in. On paper, here's what the sales numbers actually say happened. While Honda was writing off billions on electric cars nobody got the chance to buy, the gas-powered side of Acura was quietly having its best stretch in nearly 2 decades. It started with the Integra. In 2022, Acura brought the name back after a 16-year absence, on a Civic-based hatchback aimed squarely at the enthusiasts who'd loved the original in the 1990s. In 2024, it added a Type S version with over 300 horsepower and a 6-speed manual transmission, no automatic offered at all. Acura brand officer John Ikeda summed up the thinking behind it in 4 words. We are a performance brand. The results showed up fast. In the first quarter of 2026, the same quarter, Honda was absorbing its electric vehicle losses. Acura's own sales climbed more than 5%, driven largely by the Integra up over 25%, and by the new ADX, an entry-level gas-powered crossover that had only gone on sale a year earlier and was already up more than 40 times over its own launch quarter. Acura passed Cadillac to become the 4th largest luxury brand in America, while BMW, Lexus and Mercedes all posted declines around it. So what actually saved Acura? It came down to 3 things. First, going back to what the brand meant in 1986, performance you could actually feel, not just a badge on the trunk. Second, admitting that its 2 biggest modernization bets, the 2nd generation NSX and the ZDX, had failed for the same underlying reason, asking loyal buyers to trust an identity Acura hadn't fully earned yet. Third, getting lucky enough that its return to basics landed in the same year its electric ambitions collapsed, instead of a year later when there might not have been anything left to fall back on. Honda's American luxury gamble started with 2 cars and a made-up Latin word in 1986. 40 years later, it's still figuring out exactly what it's betting on, still capable of losing billions and gaining ground in the same quarter. That contradiction isn't a flaw in the story. At this point, it might just be what Acura actually is. If you want the next breakdown the moment it lands, subscribing does that for you automatically.